Hi, everybody. Welcome to Talkback with Judy Simpson Cook. I am Judy Simpson Cook. This is the show where we have conversations, or rather I do, with storefront favorites. And today I am particularly excited to have a dear old friend with me, and his name is Willie Stratford Jr. Hi, Willie.
Hey, darling. How you doing, Judy?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. As I trust you are.
Yes, I'm doing okay. Trying to think of ways to keep theater alive, and this isn't theater exactly, but it's a way to remind people that the storefront theater is out here.
Yes.
And that you and I are out here as well. So have you, this is your first opportunity to be on Zoom, right?
Yes, ma'am. It certainly is. It's I'm a Zoom virgin, so you.
It doesn't take too long to get initiated. I'm hoping to perhaps do some more. I've done some theater things. I'm hoping to do more, and of course would want to include you unless you complete this interview and say never, never again.
You know, I can never say never to you.
Well, thank you. Why don't you tell me, and therefore everyone, a little bit of your background, like where you were born and grew up, and do you have siblings, all that sort of thing?
Oh, my pleasure. Yes, I'm one of the few, the proud, the native Charlotteans. I was born here, raised here, went to school here. Was in the Air Force. I have one son. I have 6 grandchildren. I have a lovely, lovely wife by the name of Orlando, whom you know. And that's basically, that's me in a nutshell. I'm a Charlottean, born and raised. One of the few, the proud, the native.
Well, I understand.
I was telling my son the other day, if good Lord willing, I live long enough, in 2025, our family would have been in Charlotte for 100 years.
Wow. Where was your family before that?
My grandmother moved here from a town called Van Wyck, South Carolina, back in 1925 with my father, who at the time was 2 years old.
I know that town. It's just over the hill from me, down here in Waxhaw.
Yep.
I had no idea that you had relatives there. Well, is Orlando retired, or is she working?
Yes, she's retired. Until recently, she was doing some work from home stuff. She does what do you call them, mediations for the insurance companies, but because of the COVID, they stopped meeting. They're doing everything by phone now. But so she decided she just re-retire. She retired and then she started doing that, so now she's re-retired.
I see. I don't like to call myself retired, but I don't do a whole lot, so maybe I am.
The jobs I had, I never was able to retire from and just stop working.
That's my acting career in a nutshell. Well, tell me about your acting career. When did the bug bite you?
Frankly, I pretty much backed into everything I've done as far as performing. My father, I got out of the Air Force. He was on the board of, at that time, the Little Theater of Charlotte. And he was in PR. And one day he called me and said, the theater was doing A Raisin in the Sun. It's the first majority Black cast they'd ever done at that point. This was in 1973. And he called me and says, hey man, I want you to try out for this play. They're doing Raisin in the Sun, I think you should try out. And I said, hey, I don't know anything about acting. I just gotten out of the Air Force the year before. And I said, son, trust me, I'm your father. You've been acting all your life. And I didn't know what he meant by that at the time. In fact, I still don't. But I went and tried out for it. And a man by the name of Jack Shaver, you may remember Jack, I'm not sure if you knew him or not. He was the director. And so I went for a little reading. I'd never been to a reading before, audition, nothing like that. I'm just sitting in a room, a bunch of other people reading stuff. And so he said, okay, everybody come back on Thursday and we'll hand out parts. So I showed up, he called people, said, come on back. He handed out scripts, and he handed me a script that said Walter Lee. And I went, are you crazy? I don't know anything about acting. And so I actually called him after that night at his house. I went, man, I don't know anything about this acting thing. There's a lot of words here. So he said, no, you'll be fine. And there was a gentleman who was in the cast who had done Raisin in the Sun in college. And I said, well, why don't you give this part to him? Because he already knows the part, right? That's how much I knew about theater. He says, no, I wanted you to do it because he is someone else's Walter Lee. You will be my Walter Lee. And I did it. And I've been doing it ever since. I did that. I think we had 9 shows all total that week, and I think 7 of them were standing ovations. I was bit.
I understand, and I'm not surprised at those ovations, but it goes to prove that you can trust Willie Stratford Sr., God rest him, and Jack Shaver, wherever
Yes.
he is.
Yeah, so they are the reasons that we're having this conversation now.
Excellent. My origins began in Theater Charlotte too. My first play I wrote was there. Was happened because of that. Is that your favorite role ever, or do you have another role that's more of a favorite?
My favorite, I really don't know if I have a favorite. I love 1963. That was one of my favorite plays ever. Playing Joe opposite Sharon was a wonderful experience. I loved that, I really did. In fact, I saw your other Talkback, and I would love to be able to reprise that as she was saying. But lately I've been doing some things at Central Piedmont doing August Wilson pieces.
Oh.
And for them, and I think one of my favorite roles was the one I did called Joe Turner's Come and Gone. And that was a wonderful piece. And plus I did Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which is going to be on Netflix, I understand, because that was Chadwick Boseman's last role. I
heard that.
Yes, and I did that.
Want to see that.
I did that 2 years ago. Played the character Slow Drag. It was really a wonderful play. But I've done, and one of my most interesting roles was playing a Nazi war criminal for someone dear to us. Remember the Rocket Man's last night of the Rocket Man? Jawohl, yeah. How I had to come with a German accent.
You were quite wonderful. That was a challenging piece that turned out pretty well. You, of course, are always wonderful in whatever you play. So, you can bring truth and light to the role. Is there a role that got away? One that you really, truly wanted, you auditioned for, and then you didn't get it?
I really can't say that there is. I don't know. I guess maybe over the years I've been blessed. Most of the shows that I've done, I frankly haven't auditioned for. Most of them will call me up and say, Willie, I'm doing this, will you be interested? And I said, sure. So very rarely in the last, I'd say 15, 20 years, have I really, see, I go back, let me just throw this in. In the 70s, I formed a theater company called the Ebony Group and Company.
Yes.
And for 5 years, we toured all over Charlotte. Our motto was, if people won't come to the theater, we'll take the theater to the people. So we performed almost in every stage at that time venue in Charlotte, including parks, festivals, you name it, we were there. And we used to tour a show called God's Trombones. And also in the 70s, we produced God's Trombones, someone you know very well by the name of Jack Cannon.
Yes.
He took the script and he adapted it made it into a musical called The Black Preacher. And we produced that at Ovens Auditorium. And that probably is the pinnacle of my, quote, theater career, not on stage, not being on stage, but being a part of something that I think was really, really beautiful. It was in 1979, February, we did for Black History Month. And it was just wonderful. We packed the house, it was 2,400 people. And when the last note was sung, there's a wonderful young man by the name of Sammy Stevenson, who actually, later in his career, he went to the Cincinnati Conservatory for Music and ended up at the Metropolitan Opera.
Wow.
But he was here with us before he left. And when the last note was sung, there were 2,400 people on their feet screaming. That's the pinnacle of my theater career. And I wasn't even on stage.
I understand that feeling. I truly do. Well, I was going to ask you about Ebony Group, and so you've basically told me. Did you do other shows of note with that company?
Well, the very first show we did was a show called Ceremonies in Darko. Our emphasis was to do Black theater because no one was doing it at all. In fact, I won't go to that story, but so there was no Black theater being done. And a friend of mine named Nathaniel Rory and Sandra McMullen, whom you know,
yes,
we formed a theater company. And so we started doing, the first show we did was Ceremonies in Dark Old Men. We did, I'm trying to think how many plays. We did so many, and this was so long. But the first show was Ceremonies in Dark Old Men. We did God's Trombones. We did Earth and Stars. We did Green Pastures. We did, we just went down a list of we were together about 5 years all told. Right. And it was just a labor of love on all of our parts. And the beauty of that is I still have those very close friends today. So it was a wonderful time in my life, a wonderful time. A lot of creativity around good people, wonderful actors. So that was probably that 5 years was really the best 5 of my theater career.
See, there's just really nothing like an ensemble experience.
Exactly.
It's all clicking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm supposed to be asking you questions, not telling you stuff, but I will tell you that when I think about 1963, or I read it, yours is the voice, that original cast, those are the voices I hear in my head, and probably always will. So that's a nice thing for me.
At the time, you said, when I wrote this, I had you in mind. And I went, you did? So thank you for that.
Well, I don't know what would have surprised you about that, but talk to me a little bit. Let me back up and tell you why I'm asking this. Years ago, you invited the folks at JTA, the talent agency, where you were represented and where I worked as an agent. You invited us to come to the Excelsior Club, and you were performing. And I'm just curious, I've been reading a lot about the club in the newspaper and what might happen to it, and I'm just curious to know if you've been involved at all in any attempt to restore it or save it or sign a petition, whatever.
No, I can't say that I have, but the Excelsior Club has been a part of my personal history. As I said, I invited you guys there. I've gone through several iterations as a performer. I've acting in theater, then I did stand-up comedy for I think about 10 or 12 years. But there's also a period between the Ebony Group and Company and the comedy where I put together a band, a group called Artiste. And we were performing at the Excelsior. But Excelsior was basically where we were performing. At that time, it was like a cover band. I did the emceeing, did a couple of comedy skits. That's why I was inviting you to come see.
Yes.
And plus, before that, my father and they were all, I grew up with the Excelsior. And when I was a little boy, my mother and father were divorced. So my father would go out, on weekends, he'd party and stuff. And I was a little boy and I was with him. I lived with my father and my grandmother, long story short. But he'd go out on weekends sometime, he'd take me to the Excelsior with him. The bartenders knew me at the Excelsior when I was a little boy. Okay, because I was telling the stool next to my dad and I'd be having a Coke and he'd be talking politics and drinking with his friends or whatever. And I'd be sitting there going, just looking around, And so the lady behind the bar, they used to call me Little Strat.
Oh.
So I've been in and out of the Excelsior since I was a kid, because that was, as it says, the center of the community, especially for politics and other things culturally. So it's I've been in and out of that whole situation for most of my life. But it's a wonderful place, wonderful people. I remember Jimmy McKee was the man who started it back in 1947, the year I was born, actually. And so I grew up around in and out of the Excelsior over the years.
Well, it's just, I don't know why it resonates with me, because I've had very little experience with it, but when I look at it, it's just, history comes off of it in waves.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's just a meaningful place that I hope is preserved.
Some of the greatest performers around at the time during that era had performed at the Excelsior. It was part of what they called the Chitlin circuit at the time.
Yeah, Well, let's return to what you mentioned briefly. Your comedy, comedies. Yes, I can talk. I can think of words. Career. Your comedy career.
Stand up, yes.
Yes.
Well, I started doing stand up in 1985. A friend of mine, like I said, I backed into everything I've done in this business. You remember a man by the name of Lionel Norman?
Oh, yes.
Yes, he used to work at Jeff's. Okay, well, Lionel and I, when I was doing commercials because of JTA, in fact, that's how I got into commercials. I backed into that. When I was doing, let me just back up for a second. When I was doing A Raisin in the Sun, Jan Thompson came to dress rehearsal. And after the show, I'm leaving, and we're in my car, and this little white lady walks over to me and goes, "How'd you like to be in commercials?" I'm like, what? At that time, no blacks were doing commercials in this area at all, period. So she said, "Hey," I said, "Sure." I'm thinking she got a hustle going or something. I don't know. So because of the commercials, I met Lionel Norman. And because I met Lionel, because he was a sound tech with Jefferson Productions on the commercials. And so he and some friends of his were into comedy, and they were talking about starting a comedy club, which became the Comedy Inn. And because of him, I always liked comedy. See, I was a TV kid. So I watched Ed Sullivan. I knew all the comics. I saw the first time Richard Pryor was on Ed Sullivan. I saw Bill Cosby when he first started on Ed Sullivan. I saw all these people. But see, my thing with theater, comedy, these things, I never saw myself doing it. Other people saw me doing it, but I never saw me doing these things. So anyway, they started the Comedy Inn. For 5 years, I would go there on weekends and just work on an act. Me and Lionel and the other guys, we all started out together, this comedy group here in Charlotte. Sarah Helms, my dear friend. And in 1985, I did my first professional job. My first professional job was opening for the Temptations at what's now Bojangles Coliseum, to a packed house. And I'll tell you a little story. I was nervous. I was excited because I grew up listening to Temptations, My Girl and all this stuff. And so I was going to open for him. And my dad and my grandmother now were having dinner. And I told him, I said, "Look, Dad, I'm opening for the Temptations. This weekend, I can get you, tickets backstage and the whole thing, right?" He was, "Oh, son, I would love to come. I would love to come, but I'm afraid I really got this important meeting I have to go to." I said, "Okay, well, hey, it is what it is." So I do my show, and just it's so funny. I'm thinking about this. I just listened to the tape of that show the other day. I killed. I didn't realize I killed. I said, "Ooh, I was good." So anyway, I did the show, and a couple of nights later, my dad and I having dinner, and we just sitting eating. He goes, "You were good." I said, "What do you mean?" "You were good the other night. You were good." I said, "But you said you had no pressure on you. You didn't even know I was sitting out there." So he came to the show, but he never told me.
That's wonderful.
Sneaky that way.
That is great.
Yeah, so,
I think I probably would have paid them to let me hang around where the Temptations were.
Yes. So after that, I went on the road for 10 years, doing stand-up all over the Southeast, Midwest. There's a circuit called the Comedy Zone, the Punchline Circuit. Did the circuit, the Comedy Caravan in the Midwest, Kentucky, Indiana, all up through there. So for 10 years, I was on the road doing stand-up.
I think I saw you at the Comedy Zone in Charlotte. I think I saw you at the Comedy Zone. That same crowd from JTA.
Yep. Oh, yeah, I remember that night. We won't go into that. But,
we'll always remember that, Willie, always.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll remember evening.
Yes. Well,
and Open for the Temptations, Smokey Robinson, Sinbad. So it was neat.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, is there as much comedy going on today as there used to be? Doesn't seem like I hear about it as much, but I'm always getting comedians in my Facebook feed.
No, the circuit that we used to work basically was from about the mid to late 80s to the mid to late 90s. And then the circuit just kind of dried up. But comedy was big from maybe 85 to 95, because all sorts of clubs would do one-nighters. You'd go with clubs, discos, all kind of clubs, just have a one-night comedy. The Comedy Zone tour, the Punchline, they had several clubs, Atlanta, Florida, all through Alabama, Georgia. But it was just like it was a thing that just sort of went from 85 to about 95. My last performance as a professional stand-up was in 1996. I did a show for a club in Myrtle Beach called Going Bananas, I think it was. But yeah, so it was just a thing that came up and went away. Because it got to a certain point that I had to make a decision whether or not I was going to continue comedy by going to LA or New York, because that's basically the only two choices as far as stand-up. Was go to LA or New York, or to stay home and see what happens here. And I believe in, we get messages from all sorts of places in life. And so if I was in the middle of this decision, trying to decide, am I going to go to LA and New York and try to make this comedy thing work, or am I going to stay here in Charlotte? And one day I was going down North Tryon Street. There used to be a company there called Scandura. I'm not sure even what they made or whatever, but they had a marquee out front of their business and always have a saying or a quote for the day or whatever. And I remember going down the street for some reason. I used to go by there and just look at it sometimes. I was going down the street and I looked at that marquee and it said, "Grow where you are planted."
Oh.
I said, okay. So I stayed.
And some of us are very, very happy about that.
Oh, I am too. Trust me. The last thing LA needed was another waiter, or New York another waiter, or whatever. I'm glad I stayed here. Very glad.
So no regrets about that then?
None.
Great. Well, I just want to ask you a bit. We don't have a lot of time left, but I think we have enough to jump in here. I want to ask you about your dad just a bit. Mm-hmm. Willie Stratford Sr. was the postmaster for the...
He was first African American. My dad had 3 jobs when he left the post office. He was a postmaster of the post office downtown, first African American in Charlotte to be a postmaster there. He was the PR manager for the post office in this region. And he was something else, because when he left, they had to hire 3 people. Really, that's true. They had 3 people to replace him when he left.
And he also did commercials, and he wrote poetry. And I don't know what all else. But,
yes, he was very creative. I have his book of poetry right behind me. But he wrote poetry from the time he was a young man, from the time he was a kid. And finally, he got it published in 1993. After he retired from the post office in 1983, he started painting. And some of his poems and his paintings, I guess his most famous or one most notable poem is called "Black Is My Hand," which is a wonderful poem. And if I knew you asked me that question, I'd have it sitting here and read it for you.
Perhaps there'll be another opportunity.
Cool.
Well, it's not enough sometimes. Well, tell me about it. I want to ask this. Was he not a civil rights activist?
Oh, yes.
And that was in the 60s, 70s, or throughout his entire life?
Entire life. My father was probably one of the most socially active people that you would ever meet. He served on more boards, I think, than any human being in history. He was on the board of the Native American board, the Christians and Jews, for Christian and Jews, I forget the name of the actual boards, but if you go down his resume, it's all full of all the boards that he served on. In fact, like I said earlier, the reason I got into theater is because he was on the Little Theater Board.
See it too, you know.
Exactly. So,
and how old were you when he first got involved in the activism? Didn't he march with Julius Chambers and?
He didn't march with Chambers, but they were very offensive. He worked in the post office, so therefore the Hatch Act situation.
Right, he could not just get out there.
Not openly go out and do things, but he did things anyway. But he couldn't go out and march and do the other things that other people did because he was a federal employee.
Right. And have you followed in his footsteps at all? Are you into activism or?
This is what I decided to do. Since 2006, I wanted to do something I thought would be meaningful.
Yes.
I'm not an organization person. I'm not a joiner per se. But in 2006, I signed up to work with the Board of Elections. Mm-hmm. So right now I am a site coordinator at this collection. I've been doing it for 14 years now. I'll be at East Mecklenburg High School as a site coordinator there, doing what I can to make sure things go as well as they possibly can within my purview. Okay, so but yeah, that's how I do. I'm working that way.
Well, we all find our own ways. Mine is putting stuff on paper.
Exactly.
Plays, you know.
And which you do so wonderfully.
I need to do some more of that. I went through a cold spell, but very recently I did a short one-woman piece that I have on video. But we're not here to talk about me. We're to talk about you. And we don't have much time yet. So let me just ask, is there anything else that you would like to share about yourself, your life?
I'll be honest with you. I don't really think about myself that much.
What kind of actor are you?
Not working. No, I'm just pleased to be here, to have friends like you and my lovely wife, my son, my grandkids. You wake up every day and go, let's just see what adventures are going to happen today.
That's a very healthy way to approach life, I think. Rather than my way, which is what bad's going to happen now.
It's all an adventure. Sometimes
I'm really not that negative.
Sometimes adventures are good and sometimes they're not, but hey.
That's true. I can't think of anything more fun than talking to you. Thank you so much for going through the Zoom ordeal and talking with me. And I hope to actually see you face to face sometime. And if not, I hope to see you on Zoom again, perhaps doing a performance of some sort.
Well, as soon as you give me a script, I'll be more than happy to.
I don't think it'll be very long. It'll be soon. Thanks, Willie.
Love you, babe. Thank you.
Love you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.